Buried Alive. I'm Jason Horton.
I'm Rebecca Lieb.
And this is Ghost Town.
On December 17th, 1968, Emory College student Barbara Mackle was readying herself for midterm exams. Battling the flu, Barbara was nervous about her performance, like many other college students at the time. But the end of finals wouldn't be what Barbara envisioned. In fact, the next days of her life would manifest like a horror movie. Her mother chloroformed, herself kidnapped for ransom and then buried alive in a high-tech coffin, while the FBI, including J. Edgar Hoover himself, would be frantically trying to find her. Today on Ghost Town, the macabre kidnapping of socialite Barbara Jane Mackle. At the end of 1968, Barbara was attending Emory University in Atlanta when she got really sick with the flu. Trying to tough it out, her flu got so bad that she had to leave one of her exams. Concerned about her daughter's declining health, Jane Mackle, Barbara's mother, planned on driving to Atlanta, grabbing Barbara, and taking her to their home in Coral Gables, Florida for the winter break. So, Jane Mackle drove down, and before they left, the two stayed the night at a college campus hotel, the Rodaway Inn. Mackle's boyfriend, Stuart Hunt Woodward, visited them to see how they were doing and left. Barbara Mackle, however, wasn't just an ordinary college student. She was born in 1948 to Robert Mackle, a big-time property developer and co-founder of the Deltona Corporation, one of the most successful real estate development companies in the southern United States. This is what piqued the interest of 23-year-old Gary Stephen Christ and his lover, 26-year-old Ruth Eisman Scheer. Sure, Grist was married with a family, had a research background at MIT, and who currently worked for the Marine Science Institute at the University of Miami. But he was also a philanderer and an ex-convict who had many run-ins with the law. Eisman Scheer was a Honduran chemist and pharmacologist currently enrolled as a grad student at the Marine Science Institute. They met during a university-sponsored trip on a research vessel to romantic Bermuda, where they began their own relationship. In November 1968, Christ decided he needed to make some money, big money, and that ransom was an easy, relatively speaking, way to do that. After much research, Christ came up with a plan to construct a highly sophisticated and cleverly designed casket-like container that he consistently called, quote, the capsule. He'd put his victim in, get the money, and let them out. Simple, right? Knowing the Mackle family, as most did in Florida, he decided young Barbara would be his perfect target. In a small U.S. Marine Corps surplus construction trailer parked in the grounds of the Marine Science Institute, he began building the capsule. It measured 6 feet long, 23 inches high, and 23 inches wide, with a weight of 240 pounds. The capsule was designed to sustain the life of its occupant underground for 7 days max. After a bit of coercion, Christ persuaded Eisman Scheer to test the capsule by having her lay down in it for several hours with the lid closed, and he saw that everything worked well. Officially, the plan was in motion. A couple days before her kidnapping, Christ and Eisman Scheer drove down to Emory, but realized Mackle was not in her dorm, and was actually staying temporarily at the very hotel that they were staying at. They obtained her room number through some gentle prodding and phoned the Mackle's room to confirm. Around 4 a.m. on December 17, 1968, someone knocked on the Mackle's door, long after Mackle's boyfriend had left. Jane Mackle, confused, asked who it was. A male voice responded from the other side of the door that he was a police officer and explained that Barbara's boyfriend had been in a serious accident. Christ had done his homework and mentioned Woodward's name, so Jane Mackle felt comfortable and opened the door. Christ, in a police hat and carrying a rifle, rushed in with Eisman Scheer. Jane Mackle was forced onto the bed, face down, tied up, gagged with duct tape, and half chloroformed. Wearing only her nightgown, Barbara Mackle was taken into the freezing cold, the two kidnappers and their victim arriving at a densely wooded area where they had buried the capsule in a 6.5-foot-long by 4-foot-long deep hole, a gravesite, as it were. Ruth injected the terrified Mackle with a tranquilizer, which she had prepared to facilitate getting her into the capsule. The capsule itself contained a sleeping pad and blankets. The food provided inside was carefully selected to have Mackle with an adequate amount of nutrients for a few days. No detail was overlooked. A chemical toilet, albeit a crude one, was supplied with toilet tissues and even Kotex sanitary napkins in case Mackle needed them. After placing Mackle in the capsule, the lid was secured with 20 heavy-duty 3.5-inch screws. It would have been escape-proof for anyone, much less a slightly built girl suffering with the bad flu. Finally inside, unsure of whether she'd make it out alive or not, Mackle received typewritten instructions. Here are some highlights of those instructions found inside the capsule. Do not be alarmed. You are safe. You are presently inside a fiberglass-reinforced plywood capsule buried beneath the ground near the house in which your kidnappers are staying. Your status will be checked approximately every 2 hours. The capsule is quite strong. You will not be able to break it open. Be advised, however, that you are beneath the water table. If you break open a seam, you would drown before we could dig you out. The capsule instrumentation contains a water-sensitive switch, which will warn us if the water enters the capsule to a dangerous degree. Your life depends on the air delivered to your chamber via the ventilation fan. This fan is powered by a lead-acid storage battery capable of supplying the fan motor with power for 270 hours. However, the use of the light and other systems for only a few hours, coupled with the higher amperage drain, will reduce this figure to only 1 week of safety. Should the air supplied prove to be too much, you can partially block the air outlet with a piece of paper. A muffler has been placed in the air passage to prevent any noise you make from reaching the surface. If we detect any commotion which we feel is dangerous, we will introduce ether to the air intake and put you to sleep. The light uses 2.5 times the amperage of the air circulation system. Use of the light, when not necessary, will cut your battery's safety margin substantially. If you use the light continuously, your life expectancy will be cut to 1/3 of the week we have allotted to you before you are released. Your capsule contains a water jug with 3 gallons of water and a tube from which to drink it. Be careful to blow the water from the tube when you're finished drinking to avoid siphoning the water onto the floor when the tube end drops below the water level. Your capsule contains a bucket for refuse and the products of your bowel movements. The bucket has an antibacterial solution in it. Don't tip it over. Your warmth depends on body heat, so regulate the air to prevent loss of heat from the capsule. A case of candy is provided to furnish energy to your body. Tranquilizers are provided to aid you in sleeping, the best way you have to pass the time. We're sure your father will pay the ransom we've asked in less than 1 week. When your father pays the ransom, we will tell him where you are, and he'll come for you. Should he fail to pay, we will release you, so be calm and rest. You'll be home for Christmas, one way or the other. What they didn't tell Mackle was that her tranquilizing would come from the water she drank, which was laced with. Also, she wouldn't be monitored every few hours, as the two returned to the hotel to check out and then started the 660-mile drive to Miami. During all of this, the terrified, flu-ridden 20-year-old remained thick-skinned. Quote, I screamed and screamed. The sound of dirt got farther and farther away, she recounted in her 1971 book, 83 Hours Till Dawn. Finally, I couldn't hear anything above. I screamed for a long time after that. She wondered how she'd arrive at her family's home for Christmas. Alive, or in a different sort of coffin. More after this break.
Hi, hello, how are you? How are you doing?
Oh, hello out there.
We're checking in.
This is the check-in. You know what's happening right now.
We're doing it.
Do you like it? Not particularly, but we're doing it.
We carry on. You know what I mean?
Brave.
Bravely trudging through another break.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I want to do? I want to give. Obviously, we're talking about our government, but I think today we're going to talk about our extended government. I'm going to throw them in there a little bit.
I like that.
I want to talk about. Okay, we have our governor, of course. We have our mayors, of course.
Of course.
But there's people that have to answer to the governor and mayor, even though they're high up on the food chain, is the ghost alderman.
Oh, I like this little pivot. I'm intrigued.
Yeah, I want to just throw it out there for today. Just like I'll throw a little.
I like that.
I just want to honor them. And I think what got me into that is because I guess on Patreon, other Patreon accounts can recommend another Patreon, and one of our favorite podcasts, Swindled, recommended us. A little thing popped up, and they recommended us as somebody you might want to patronize. And we obviously do that for them. We are subscribed, been longtime subscribers. People talk about ads and not like listen to them. Listen, I listen to Swindled on Patreon because I don't want to hear the ad. So I'm with you. I get it. I'm also of that mindset. So, but I pay heavily for it. It's $7,000 a month, but it's worth it.
Every penny.
I'm very rich. So thank you to Swindled.
Yeah,
for that.
We love them.
I'm just going to shout out Ghost Alderman, and then we're going to just shout out the rest. This is going to be a shout out day.
Little shout out day.
Some names you may not have heard.
New blood.
Yeah. So here are the Ghost Aldermen. Carrie Voorhis.
Hello.
You think I'm saying that right? It's either Voorhees or Voorhis. This one, I know what their name is because it's kind of deep within the data, but the name they go by is Beat Gen Xer, and I don't know if they don't want their name out there, so I'm just going to say Beat Gen Xer as a fellow Gen Xer. Hello.
Hi.
And Paula Townsend.
Hello.
Their alderman. Matthew Clemens LeRae. Alderman.
Love it. A hit.
Classic.
Hit maker.
And that would be our alderman. And I mean, the mayors. You know those mayors. Got to say their names a little bit differently. Got to say their names a little bit differently. Little Ashley Matson.
Hello.
Little Kat Giselle.
Howdy.
Little Kelly Meehan.
Hey. Little
Marissa Rothermel.
Bonjour.
Little Chris Hernandez.
Hola.
The fact that I'm saying Lil and Little is
great.
Very weird.
It's great.
It's a term of endearment.
Yeah.
It's not
you're
anything else.
You're adorable to us in a way that is we really respect.
But also you're cool and you rock.
Yeah. You're fucking great in every way.
Yes.
That's a little.
And at the top of the food chain. Way more top than the Pope is.
Oh. Pope? Pope who?
Who decides who the new Pope is? You know what I mean?
She does.
That would be our governor,
Avian Noble.
If you want no ads, no chit chat, 7 days free, a bonus episode that Rebecca is cooking up as we speak.
You're going to like it.
Head on over to patreon.com/ghosttownpod. Want to get back into it?
Let's do it. In December 1968, heiress Barbara Mackle was trapped in a capsule somewhere in the woods of Atlanta, Georgia. Her captors, Gary Christ and Ruth Eisman Shear, were headed to Miami. At 9:30 a.m., Christ telephoned the Mackle residence and informed a house guest where to find a ransom note that they had placed there on Thursday, December 12th, just days before heading to Atlanta. The note was a Xerox copy of a 4.5-page, uniquely explicit, typewritten ransom demand note in a glass tube, buried under a rock near a palm tree in the Mackles' home garden. In essence, it explained that their daughter had been buried alive in an escape-proof capsule and that the capsule would sustain her for no longer than 7 days. The note demanded $500,000 in $20 bills for her release. Arriving in Miami at 3 a.m. on Wednesday, December 18th, mailed a piece of jewelry of Mackle's, a gold ring, and a Polaroid photo he had taken of her by the burial site to the Mackle family. This famous photo would haunt Barbara Mackle for the rest of her life. A photo of a young girl in a coffin-like space, grinning vacantly, holding a printed sign to her chest that read a single word: kidnapped. In an interview with Ruth Eisman Shear, FBI agent William Bean was told a first photo was taken of Mackle before the one that was eventually mailed, but it was rejected by Christ because she wasn't smiling. Christ told her to, quote, smile for daddy, thus the labored smile in the now iconic photo. Christ and Eisman Shear moved into a house trailer formerly occupied by Christ's family, whom he had separated from and sent to live with his soon-to-be ex-in-laws in California. Then they waited. Of course, the Mackles had the money soon after receiving the note. They were a big deal, as Christ had known, with Robert Mackle being personal friends of the then-President-elect Richard M. Nixon. In fact, they had built for President Nixon one of the penthouse units at their second high-rise condominium on Marco's Beach. Another friend, J. Edgar Hoover, took personal charge of the FBI, mobilizing units throughout Florida and Georgia while launching massive investigation and search efforts for Mackle. In the meantime, Florida's U.S. Senator George Smathers agreed to coordinate the information supplied to the Florida State Police. Robert Mackle put the money in a large suitcase and left it where he was instructed to do so, just south of Miami along the bay. Christ stole a motorboat and took the suitcase, sailed a couple of miles north in Biscayne Bay towards a public park where he had parked his car. During this time, Eisman Scheer was the lookout with a walkie-talkie that went straight to Christ, just in case any police were in the vicinity. When Christ exited his boat with the money at about 4 a.m., he had to walk a few hundred yards to his car, where he saw a local police cruiser with 2 officers in the vicinity. He panicked, dropped the suitcase, and began running, carrying only his rifle. One officer pursued him, firing 2 shots at Christ and noting that he was armed, but he didn't know if he hit him or not. It's certainly fortunate for Mackle that these shots missed Christ, because if he had been killed, Mackle would very likely have died in her chamber, since Christ alone knew its precise burial place. Eisman Scheer was waiting for Christ at a prearranged rendezvous point, but he never showed. Thinking he took the money and ran, she dropped her walkie and took a bus from Miami to Houston, where she went on the run. In his own getaway, Christ also dropped his walkie. His car was seized by the FBI, who were now alerted to the activity and the money. Things were unraveling, who were now alerted to the activity in the area and the trajectory of Christ's fleeing. Things were unraveling fast. At 9 p.m., Christ appeared at a boat supply company in Palm Beach, Florida, and purchased a motorboat he paid $2,800 in ransom cash for. Then he called the FBI to explain that he was Barbara Mackle's kidnapper and provided directions to Mackle's captive site. Then he motorboated away. About 50 agents were dispatched to the scene. Unfortunately, none of them thought to bring a shovel for Mackle's excavation. The directions were somewhat vague and explicit. When agents arrived at the wooded area around 1:30 p.m., they searched randomly for a few hours without success. At about 4 p.m., as dusk approached, one agent discovered what appeared to be a little freshly dug soil. When all of them started digging, they heard some muffled, thumping noises like someone pounding on a wall. Digging with sticks, boards, hands, and the irons, the FBI removed 18 inches of brush of soil from the surface of the capsule and opened the capsule with makeshift tools. According to FBI agent William Bean, when they found Mackle, quote, "A cheer went up when she was found to be alive. In a weakened condition, she was lucid, but she could not stand up. Her first comment to her rescuers was, quote, 'You guys are the handsomest men I've ever seen.'" After an examination from a physician at a nearby FBI agent's house, Mackle mentioned she repeatedly sang every church hymn she could remember while entombed in the capsule to keep her sanity. She was soon after reunited with her father because he was notified by FBI Director himself, Edgar Hoover, of her recovery and her condition. Of course, the search for Christ continued. He was eventually spotted in a boat south of Fort Myers in the Gulf of Mexico, headed north. Christ landed on the beach of a small, uninhabited island called Hog Island, where he stuffed some cash in his pockets and ran ashore, where eventually he was arrested. Ironically, the island was once owned by none other than Barbara Mackle's own father. Christ was extradited to Atlanta to be tried for kidnapping, a capital crime under Georgia's laws. On December 28th, Ruth Eisman Scheer was placed under the FBI's most wanted list, the first time a woman had ever been placed on that list. She was found when she was fingerprinted while applying for a job as a nurse at a hospital in rural Oklahoma, and arrested at her current job working as a car hop at a local restaurant. On May 26th, a jury found Christ guilty of kidnapping and recommended mercy, thus saving him from the death penalty. He was sentenced to life in prison. He was actually, after 10 years, released from prison and began studying medicine in the Caribbean. Ruth Eisman Scheer was prosecuted in the same courtroom as Christ, with the same judge presiding. She pled guilty and was sentenced to 7 years in prison, and afterwards she would be deported back to Honduras, her native country. After serving only 2 years of her sentence, she was released in the fall of 1971 and went back to Honduras. According to FBI agent William Bean of the whole affair, quote, "It was tragic, in my view, of someone of Christ's high level of intelligence failed to direct his talents into legitimate pursuits." All but $197.29 was returned to the Mackle family, and the motorboat Christ bought with the ransom money Mackle donated to the Charlotte County, Florida Sheriff's Department. In 1971, Barbara Mackle wrote a book about her experience, but remained private afterwards, now in her 70s, living quietly with her family, having moved on from the most terrifying 3.5 days of her life.